Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. This week we look into the issue of anti-Semitism in North America with the unfortunate anti-Semitic typo made by the University of Michigan, how the Anti-Defamation League is trying to clean up the internet of anti-Jewish hate. And we discuss if being anti-Israel is actually being anti-Semitic. Let's get started. The Times of Israel is reporting that the University of Michigan accidentally sent out emails to all of its staff and students committing to a, quote, advancing of anti-Semitism. In a letter to all students, staff, and faculty, Robert Sellers, the university's provost for equity and inclusion and chief diversity officer, said that the university must, quote, renew our commitment to the, quote, advancement of anti-racism, anti-ableism, anti-Semitism, gender equality, and building a climate resistant to sexual misconduct. The error was clear. While the anti-Semitism, of course, has the same prefix as the other terms that were used, it refers to the hatred of Jews, while the others refer to the efforts to combat the hatred and discrimination. A university spokesperson told the Jewish Telegraphic Agency that the use of the term is clearly an error. Obviously, we see here that this was a humongous mistake because no company or organization would ever come out and say that they are pro-anti-Semitism. It just would never happen. Even for groups that tend to possibly have these kind of views would never come out and say it specifically. The question that the journalists were posing towards the organization is simply, how is it possible that not a single person figured this out before sending the email to everybody in the organization? We should point out, obviously, that it is amazing that they would actually mention anti-Semitism specifically, especially in an area that probably doesn't have a huge Jewish population. Oftentimes we see things like anti-Semitism kind of get stuck in with hate in general. And the Jewish people, despite being the smallest minority of people within areas, tend to be the largest in discrimination. If I wanted to take a little bit more of a skeptical view of this situation, of course, I could point out the fact that whoever read these communications before they were being sent out, the multiple people probably who read them, not a single person realized that anti-Semitism was sort of backwards in their statement. It was sort of suggesting they were advancing anti-Semitism, obviously something that doesn't happen. But if we look and think maybe that anti-Semitism is actually such a small priority for these people that they really didn't bother to even look at it or understand the term anti-Semitism and realize that it was actually backwards. Sometimes I know nowadays people are trying to switch this idea of the word anti-Semitism because, of course, anti-Semitism would suggest, especially when it's hyphenated, that it is anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic, suggesting that there is some type of Semitic people that we are against. But of course, if we know Semitic people, this is Arabs and Jews and Muslims, they're all Semitic people. They came from that same sort of region of the world. So there isn't really an anti-Semitism, especially when you talk about Jewish people. So we've seen the term Jew hate trying to mix the, anti-Asian hate and anti-black hate and all of these things that people are doing. People are trying to change it from anti-Semitism. It's an old-fashioned term that sort of doesn't explain anything into Jew hate or anti-Jewish hate to try and put together these views with some of the other discriminations that are being talked about oftentimes these days. I would suggest that the University of Michigan definitely should review its policies on double, triple, and quadruple checking their communications before they're sent out. I don't know if there's been any other issues with some unfortunate accidents in their emails, but definitely they should do a better job of double and triple checking their emails before they're being sent to staff and students, especially on such a very difficult topic such as discrimination. But I would say that the University of Michigan, along with many other universities, should probably adopt the ideas that University of Michigan is putting out, which is to combat anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish hate. This is a very noble cause, and we see, unfortunately, campuses around the world, especially within North America, are finding very much a home for anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hate, hidden and disguised as anti-Israel hate, which we'll get into later in this podcast. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit about how the Anti-Defamation League, or the group that tries to find anti-Semitism and stop anti-Semitism around the world, is trying to clean the internet. We'll be right back on the Jewish Diaspora Report.